Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to When the Shift Hits the Fan. My name is Mark Jeffrey, and I'm here once again with my beautiful co-host, Linda Lehman. Linda, welcome to another beautiful day in our neighborhood.
Thank you, Mark. It has been a gorgeous day, hasn't it?
It certainly has. It's been a really good day. Linda and I are working on a few amazing projects that we're really excited about. And one of the things that has come up in when we're talking to people and even in our own lives, and something I've recognized in the last little while, and an exercise that I went through a few years ago, is reframing and your blame. And so today we're going to be talking about the opposites of things, accountability and then being a victim, because we tend to, as human beings, kind of get them all muddled up in between and not serving the purpose that it should. So we want you to understand that they're really, Linda, they're diametrically opposed from each other.
Yeah, they're opposite ends of the stick.
Yeah. It's not wrong. I want to be clear on this, right? It's not wrong to be victimized. And it's not right to be personally accountable. There's just a difference between the two. Because oftentimes, if we didn't know, let's put it this way, Linda, if we didn't know we were being a victim, or if we didn't feel victimized, we didn't feel hurt about something, then we'd be, on the other end of that, we'd be very insensitive to inflicting hurt on somebody else as well.
Oh, that's true. That's true, Mark. We may not even realize we're doing it.
Yeah. We all have those victim experiences, and I know I do. And it's really interesting because we were talking about something I did years ago that really did help me understand and feel things. And it's something that we want you all to do as well. As we were told, just to get a little pocketbook, a little notebook thing, just very small, 3 inches, those little guys that you can get, dollar store or whatever. And every single time that you feel like you're victimized, okay, and you're the victim of something. And it can be, and you got it, and Linda, we can give them a long list here, but that's like every time I stand in line at the grocery store, my line is the slowest line.
Yeah, you're making yourself feel like a victim. Exactly.
So there's those things, we have to learn how to recognize them. So whenever you feel like something you were hurt or you were inconvenienced or anything like that, if that's how you feel, you need to write it down immediately. And that's why you have a little pen and a little notebook. So while you're in that long lineup and everybody else is going, you just simply jot that down. Because what's going to happen over a period of, we actually had to do this for 6 whole months. But do it for the next week. And we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about how to move through these shift through all of these feelings to a better you. But for the next week, be very conscious of every single time. Like even when somebody uses a tone in their voice that makes you feel like they're angry at you, or you're not performing to their standards. Because we're going to start reframing this, because most people feel jaded, hurt, feel like a victim when it has nothing to do with you. Linda, that's a big one.
That's a huge one. And it really is and I know we'll get into this as we reframe it, but it's our choice whether we're offended or not. But most of the time we pick, yes, I'm going to allow this to offend me, and that's something that you want to write down in your little pocket notebook, is those particular times when you feel like a victim or you feel offended about something or you think somebody else is mad at you. And I want to get clear on this too, because there have been times I would need to write this down in my book, where I've tried to encourage people to, not feel like a victim anymore, or try to pull themselves out of it, and they would come back and slam me. Well, I didn't plan for that person to hit me with their car, or I didn't plan for that robbery of my house. So how can you say that I'm not a victim here?
Well, sometimes you are going to be a victim. Sometimes things happen. Like I said, sometimes it's simply not your fault. And all of us, too, have mechanisms that we have created over time that helps us work with and adapt to and handle how being a victim. And that's like some of us learning how to fight, like learning how to be a good, a negotiator. Some of us have these things flying under the radar, like disappearing, like when you're confronted with things, you just kind of fade into the background, or you create drama. You become a rescuer of puppies, like we do these things. We have or self-medicating, right? Seeking sympathy from everybody. Oh, that's the time when you have to think of those are the things that we're talking about. Not the bad things happen to people every day, and it's not your fault. And how other people act is not your fault, because they have their own coping mechanisms too. So I might say something and somebody might take it wrong and respond to me in a way that puts my back up, but I have to remember I was the first shot across the bow. Right? So if everyone was more intuitive about what they're saying and doing with other people, then we'd all be able to back up a step and reframe, immediately say, whoa, you got your back up about something, and that's not how I meant that. And I apologize that I delivered it that way. The fire's out.
Right. It's done. But, again, it was all in the reframing and sensing, if you're communicating one-on-one with somebody, that obviously the meaning that you were trying to bring forward was not the meaning that was caught on the other end.
Yep. And it happens, especially, and we talk about this a lot in the texting world and the email world. I always say this: if you got something important to say to somebody, you don't put it in a text, because it's flat. There's no emotion, and they will read whatever they want to. More arguments and more bad things have happened because of an email and because of, and look at that, the Sony Pictures fiasco, right? Those emails were sent in one regard and accepted in a different regard. Sure, they shouldn't have been said in the way they were, but I'm sure at the time someone was frustrated, someone was, angry at something, and they lashed out a little bit. And we all do that because we're human beings. But if we were held accountable every single time that we made a mistake and somebody blew it way out of proportion, that's what text and email does. There's no emotion in those things. But sometimes we have a tone, like we're busy, I'm trying to do something, and then somebody interrupts you, right? You're probably not going to go, not a problem. How can I help you? You might just say, what? Right? And they're going to go.
They jump backwards and go, oh.
Yeah, they jump backwards and go. And it happened. You go, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, sorry, I was just in the middle of something. I mean, for me, I have a really bad habit of when I'm doing something, I tune out the world. People can walk in the room. They can probably rearrange all of the furniture in my office, and I wouldn't even notice. So sometimes people would come in and interrupt me doing something, and I wouldn't even know that they were there. And they would get upset because they thought I'm ignoring them. Well, in actual fact, I kind of am. But I don't mean for that to happen, but I can tune into something so intensely that I'm working on that the rest of the world fades back. So I have an option. I'll let you storm off and be mad and pout for the rest of the day, or I can simply say exactly what I just said. When I'm working on something, you're not there. Everything disappears for me. I'm so focused on it, so I apologize. But perhaps choose a different time, like when I get up from my desk or I'm not doing something, then ask me what you need to ask me, right? So we reframe this in your mind too, because accountability and I want to be clear on this. Accountability is when, say, your career is not fulfilling, or you're doing something and it's not fulfilling a relationship, whatever it is, and you do nothing. Okay, you're not being an accountable person. You know, that's your finances. They're a nagging source of anxiety, and you do nothing. You're not being accountable. And then if you blame the economy, you blame the spouse, you blame your boss, that is playing the blame game. That does nothing for anybody. And that's what we're kind of talking about. Not when somebody runs into you, unless you're driving down the wrong side of the road, mind you. That's your fault.
Right.
But not those things. Like, things happen. People respond to us. Linda, there's so many ways that we can take things the wrong way that's a longer list. And that's why that little notebook is the best thing for you, because then you'll be able to sift and sort.
I'm actually looking forward to it, because I have to confess that I really haven't been paying tons of attention to the times that maybe I was trying to blame something, or I was feeling the victim. And a lot of times I just shrug it off. But in the moment now, I know that I'm going to be much more aware. It's going to be kind of a fun game. We as I said before, we have a choice on how we react and respond to things, and it starts with being accountable to ourselves. Do I want to feel this way based on what just happened? Am I going to hang on to this for a while and chew on it and stew on it? That's being the victim, and that's blaming circumstances and other people for the way you're feeling. And you're actually handing over your reins of control over your world and your life when you do that, when you blame something or somebody else. Back to your example of your finances or the economy, and you're blaming your boss and everything else except for yourself.
Mhm. I guess
you're not.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, there's something that I've always remembered in my life, is that being victimized is what happens to you. Being a victim is how you respond. And we're always talking about your response in all things. So, and even the accident. And here's the thing. Let's talk about that. Let's say somebody did drive into you, and we all make mistakes. And you get exceedingly upset, and you're taking a round out of this person who genuinely made a mistake. You don't know what happened in their lives. Maybe they just broke up with their spouse, and they're just having an extremely bad day, and they had a moment's lapse in attention, and there was a car accident that happened. It happens every single day. We don't pay enough attention. We talked about this last time about driving to where you're going and not understanding how you even got there. But we can, that's putting the blame, that's forcing a blame on someone that isn't fair either.
Exactly. This reminds me, this blame game and accountability. This happened a few years ago, but I did remember that I stood back and I laughed. And it's truly about taking 100% personal responsibility and being accountable for everything that happens. I was booking a trip, and it was going to be just a one-day turnaround. I was going to go up and interview somebody and then come back. Well, because of where I live, I typically have to go to a hub. I have to go through Atlanta most of the time to get wherever I want to go. Well, I have learned that I need to allow a minimum of an hour layover in Atlanta, because the airline that I have to take tends to run late. And so I need that window of time in order to get from terminal to terminal and catch my next flight.
Yeah, big airport, yeah.
Yes. So I was looking at my flight choices to make this trip, and there was a choice that would would make me get up an hour earlier than another choice. But the other choice, I had 50 minutes, 50 minutes, between the two flights. And the other one, obviously, I had an hour in that between the two flights. And so I thought, oh, man, I would love that extra hour sleep. I'm going to take a chance, and I'm going to book the little bit later one, knowing that I only had 50 minutes. So naturally that morning was foggy. And
of
so
course.
my flight from my home airport left late. And so I got to Atlanta late, and I booked it. I booked it to the next terminal. And I got there, and there were like 2 or 3 other gentlemen who kind of arrived at the same time I did. We could see the plane out there, but there was nobody at the counter. In other words, they had loaded the plane, and they were ready to go. And so I just was standing back, and those guys were acting so frustrated and so put out, and how could they do this? And so then the woman came back up from closing the door and everything. And so all 3 of them just bombarded her. I see the plane. Stop the plane. We need to get on the plane, blah, blah, blah. And, she was explaining that, you needed to be here 10 minutes before the flight and all of this. So they were blaming her at this point because they had arrived at the gate late. Yeah. But I was standing back there, just almost laughing my sides off and talking to myself saying, look, Linda, you had an option to get here with an hour or more, and you didn't do it. This is all on you, girlfriend. And so, I went and rearranged the meeting and had it at another time because they couldn't get me. They couldn't get me to the place I was going before my flight home was scheduled to go home. So anyway, it was a nice yo-yo lesson from home to Atlanta and back. But it was all me. But I could have been like those guys and blame the attendant at the desk because she didn't let them on the plane.
Yeah, and I think everybody has to understand that you don't need to be complaining and whining to be a victim either. That those people were. You become a victim when you blame yourself or other people for some problem or an error that happens. And every time you see yourself as having no choice, or at least no choice that you'd like, right, you make yourself a victim. And everyone who feels stuck and powerless is a victim. Now, the difference here, and this was a good example, Linda, is Linda had a choice. She made a choice. And these guys didn't. I know how these guys feel sometimes, like when you get things booked for you, and, you would think that if people are booking flights from place to place to place, right, and you have 3 or 4 that you have to take, and you don't have a choice. You have, and the airlines is booking this. This is how you're going to get here, and you're going to go here, and then you miss a flight. Then you feel like, well, that's not my fault. And it isn't, right? Those guys could say, look, I did the best I could. I'm not from Atlanta. I got off another plane, and you should have known I was here, right? That's the way I always think, right? But I have missed flights, and I've learned, because, I travel a lot. I've learned that happens. And there's, with those hubs, they're amazing because they'll just get you on another flight.
Right.
It might be 15 minutes later or maybe an hour later, but you are going to get on another flight to your destination. So, what happens? It happened with Alana and I when we just went to Cancun. We had to take a flight from here to Calgary. And then from Calgary, it was a direct flight to Cancun. So we got there, and my daughter happens to be a smoker, so she wanted to pop out and have a cigarette and then come back in. Well, we just weren't looking at the time properly, and we almost missed that flight. Well, that would have been the end of our vacation because there was not another flight, until the next week going there, because that's how this vacation flights went, right? Now, could we have gotten another flight with Delta or United or something down there? Yeah, we could have. No problem. It would have cost us because that wasn't their fault. She chose to go out for a cigarette, and I chose to wait, not looking at our watches thinking that we left late. We left Edmonton late, so we thought we had all this time. And then in reverse of that, though, was coming back, we had to go through customs and immigration in Calgary. And so we came in between the time of Christmas and New Year's. So we thought, oh yeah, we've got a 2-hour layover in Calgary, not a problem. We walked up the stairs from immigration, and there was a line up to the bottom of the stairs. So when I did the QR reader, I'm going, 2 hours to go through security. We could have lost, I mean, that wasn't our fault. If we missed our flight from Calgary back to Edmonton, it wouldn't have been our fault. How could we got there any sooner? Right? Were we a little bit put out that we had to stand there for 2 hours waiting to go through security? Yeah, but you know what? It's the time of the year. We didn't get caught going because we walked right into the airport, got on the planes and whatever. But coming back, so one was our fault, one wasn't our fault.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big distinction if you guys want to fine line it. We've both given you some examples. If you feel like a victim when you feel like you have no choice, but you have to understand, did you have a choice? And are you just throwing out the blame because you want to feel like a victim and not your fault and there was nothing I could do, right? Or did you have a choice and you picked the wrong one?
Mm-hmm. But either way, you have a choice on how you allow it to
respond. How you allow it to
respond
feel.
to it.
Yeah.
You could stand in line like you and Alana. You could stand in line to be put out the whole time, or you could stand back and go, you know what? It is what it is. Me getting upset about this isn't going to make this line go any faster. So how about sparking up a few conversations with other people around me and enjoying the wait?
Yeah. You know, it just, for Alana, that was funny. She said, oh, good, then I have time to have a cigarette. And I'm going, yeah, you do. You know, but it was like 40 below, and she came back in 2 seconds saying, okay, no, maybe not. You know. So, but this is it. And then, so we'll put that's your victim, that's putting blame on there. So personal accountability. Okay, so we're framing this different today. Personal accountability, it eliminates blame of yourself and of others, providing the power of choice, okay, or participation, just like we're talking about, or recreating inside your mind the experience to get different results. And it can be from things that are real, imagined, or interpreted as, okay? Because let's face it, Linda, to everyone, those are all real. Like monsters in the closet are real if you believe they're real.
Right.
Okay, so you are going to think that I have the right to be a victim 99.9% of the time, but you're wrong. You did have some choices. You have a choice of walking away from someone who's abusing you, right? So now you're not the victim anymore. Now the power shifted. They can't abuse you if you leave. If you're not satisfied in your career, you have the opportunity to either go back to school, look for another job. I mean, you have choices. But if you stand there and go there every day, I hate my job, I hate my job, I hate getting up in the morning, that is not being personally accountable. So choices. I think that's what it boils down to, Linda, right? Just choices. Do I have a choice? Did I have a choice that this happened and I was a victim? And you can be a victim of lots of things. Bad things happen to people every day. But you can respond differently to make yourself feel better about it. Or do I have monsters in my closet?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Mark. We always have a choice. You know, people tell me all the time, well, I didn't have a choice. I had to do it that way. And I'm thinking, you do have a choice. You could have done it differently. You could think about it differently and respond to it differently. And Mark, it is amazing. And I know that people kind of poo-poo this all the time. When you look at things differently, the whole situation can literally improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reframing everything.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, if you find yourself stuck in a situation, and I love to do this. Maybe you're talking with somebody and they're just, and you're in your opinion, they're being totally unrealistic and unreasonable about what they're saying. But if you stop a second, they're talking from their perspective. It's not you. It's their perspective. So if you could step back and look at it from a different perspective than what you're looking at it, you might see where they're really coming from, and then be able to make some adjustments in how you're communicating with them to help them, to help them understand then how you're interpreting what they're trying to explain or come across. Because until you actually can understand it from their point of view, you're not going to be able to make a positive difference in a situation.
Yeah. So when we're talking about being personally responsible, there's no blame. Okay, personal responsibility is this, or an accountability, is that there is no blame on any external. Okay, he, she, they, them, and definitely no blame on yourself. Like, take the blame game and put it aside. Choose differently. Because the reality is this, whether you believe this or not too, Linda, nothing in our life happens by accident, except perhaps an accident. But that is someone else or you doing something. Like, nothing happens by accident. It's interesting because squirrel, okay, it's interesting because people think that if they took away the ability of people to drive their cars and have the cars driving themselves, there'd be no accidents. Because the cars would just mechanically do something. Whereas we as human beings make choices as to change lanes when there's a car there, and those things, right? So if you think of it that way, but every activity that you do has a payoff of some sort or a protection of some sort. So it either gives us an excuse not to risk and not to be accountable for our lives, or it has a payoff whereby we will be responsible and accountable, because the win on that side, what you're going to get from that side, is much more than what you would lose as being a victim. So choices. You all have choices. And I know that some of you out there right now feel that you have none. And we acknowledge that, because we have people coming here every day to our shows and interacting with us and emailing us about how I'm a single mom of 3 and I can't get a job, and the economy. And when you sit there and going, you have choices. Like, that's, don't sit there and going, oh, it's the economy. And Linda, you always say this, if one thing is true for someone, it's got to be true for yourself as well, right? Paraphrasing you a little bit.
Mm-hmm. No, you did a good
job.
So
the same thing, if someone else has a job, you can get a job. But maybe you don't want to work at McDonald's. Maybe you don't want to be a Walmart greeter. Maybe that you feel that's beneath you. Well, it has nothing to do with the economy. It has everything to do with you.
Right. It's your choice.
Yeah, because I'm sure if you drove around town, you'd see help wanted ads in your paper and in storefronts and that everywhere. I get some people are going to live in little teeny-weeny towns, but, maybe the choice is you have to move from that town. Maybe you're comfortable where you are, but you're going to have to make some life adjustments to improve your life. Like, sometimes it's big changes that you have to face.
Mhm. Exactly. And sometimes it's little changes, and sometimes let's go back to the job choices a second. Even in small towns, I've noticed that there are jobs out there, and what I like to explain to people is, if maybe you need something that will help you get over this hump. And maybe this job that you take at McDonald's or as a Walmart greeter is just temporary until you can find something better. But instead of, being the victim then and saying, oh, I'm homeless, we're going to get kicked out of our house or our apartment because I can't find a job, it's not necessarily that you can't find a job, you can't find something that you like, but what about doing a 2 or 3 step process? Let's get you over the hump now. It may not be the best of circumstances, but if you make the best of what you wind up having to do right now, you might make those connections that will take you further down the road where you want to be. But you have to be accountable to how you're showing up every day as well. You know, you can take that job that you really don't want or don't like, but if you show up and find something that you can enjoy in it, even if it's just interacting with the people around you in a positive way, you're going to find that that's going to propel you forward to something bigger and better. If you sit there and grumble about it all day, nobody else is going to want to hire you.
No, because you're going to go in with a bad attitude. But we do this, right? We give ourselves permission too often. And we create that set of beliefs, and we talk about this a lot. You know, what you believe, you will be. And that's just the way it is. Like if you feel that you're powerless or helpless and you can't do something, you can't succeed, I'm not smart enough, I'm not strong enough, you know, I'm not whatever enough, then that's when you become that victim that should never be there. And that's when you really have to reframe this. You have to look at things and find out, you know, be the face in the mirror. We talked about this last week. Get that mirror out and say, you know, am I being realistic about how I feel about these things, or am I just pouting? And pout for a little bit. That's okay, you know, because that releases emotion and stress and all that stuff. But not for 2 or 3 days or a week or a month or a year or 2 years. You know, give yourself permission to say, I'm sad about this situation. I don't like where I am. But just like Linda said, I've got a plan. I'm making a plan.
Exactly. And follow through with your plan. But don't wreck everything around you in the process. Find some enjoyment in it somewhere.
Yeah.
Find something positive.
I know, yeah, and I know when we all feel this way. So you're not. I was almost going to say you're not special in that, but it's true. It's true though. When a relationship breaks down, we feel that it's our fault, and perhaps some of it was. But we have to be strong enough and honest enough with ourselves to figure out what part of it was, so you don't do that again, and what part wasn't. And let go of that. And if you lose your job, you have to say, was it me? Because it could have been. Maybe you were late a lot. Maybe you weren't performing to the standards that your company has set forth. And maybe when the layoff, you know, wagon came by, you were just a good choice. Their choice. Your choice because you didn't do the job, right? Maybe you brought that upon yourself. We have accountability for the things that you could have had a choice in doing, and a victim when you had nothing to do with it. And that's a huge cavern between those two.
Yes, ma'am. So, Mark, looks like we have used up our time once again.
Yep, we are. We're down here to the last couple little seconds here. So what I want to leave you with is exactly what I just said. Get out that little book. And every single time that you feel like a victim, you feel slighted, you feel hurt, you feel inconvenienced, you know, anytime it's not a positive feeling, write it down. And then at the end of the day, take a look at your little book and put it in, and then, you know, on one side, write all those things down. Then on the other side, victim or personal accountability. Where could I have made a choice to make this different? Because if you do that for a week, you're certainly going to have some really cool things happening and more understanding about yourself. That's what I have for tonight, Linda.
Oh, awesome advice, Mark. And I'd like to recommend something that I know that I've said in a previous show, but maybe on the front cover of your notebook, write this down. I am responsible for my life, for my feelings, and for every result I get. Yeah. Write it down. Say it, believe it. It's going to empower you to stop being that victim.
I love that. I love that for sure. Definitely big, bold letters at the front of that little book for sure. So once again, my friends, thank you so very much for joining us here tonight. And we have a lot of other episodes on our site, whentheshifthitsthefan.com. So if you've got fear in your life or things aren't just working out the way you want, jump over to our site, take a look at all of the sessions. We've got a couple of years of sessions and shows that are there and different advice for you. So don't be shy. Jump into the pool with us because we're going to have a great time. It's the beginning of the year. We're walking through it with you. So welcome to shifting through the bad stuff. And from Mark up here in Canada, good night, everyone.
And from Linda down here in Florida, good night.